Welcome to Intuition Unleashed, a revolution in personal liberation. The go-to podcast that helps you access intuitive guidance combined with mental health and spirituality. Let your intuition guide you and unlock a life of true liberation. And now your host, Becc Nelson.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Intuition Unleashed. It is a revolution in personal liberation. I am your host, Becc Nelson, and today we're going to be talking with my guest, Stephanie Ward, who is joining us all the way over from the UK. Hey, Stephanie.
Hey, how's it going?
Let me tell you, Stephanie is a real trooper because it's 5 o'clock here in the East Coast. However, for Stephanie, it is 10 o'clock at night.
I have my coffee.
Oh, it's lovely. I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate that. Listen, we have a lot to cover today, and today's episode proves to be completely spicy. And we'll tell you why, because Stephanie is the founder of both the Spicy Brain Collective and the Spicy Brain Energy. And she works with neurodivergent and entrepreneurs mostly. And God, can I relate to that? And when we first talked, and I got to tell you, I got to just share a little bit, even like seconds before we came on the air, I myself have recently discovered in the past few years that I have a neurodivergent brain. So I so appreciate Stephanie and what she does. And so not only has Stephanie founded the Spicy Brain Collective and the Spicy Brain Energy, and these companies help neurodivergent entrepreneurs with a range of done for you and done with you business services, which I also appreciate, so that they can achieve the success that they deserve in their business. And she started off doing, everybody has a story, right? She started off doing some copywriting, some freelancing, which she had done for 12 years. And she's going to tell us all about her story about how she was on maternity leave. And it kind of started off as something that she did to earn some money and pass the time on her maternity leave. But then she's developed since then a number of plethora of services in her one-stop shopping companies, which range from web design, diary management, Amazon KDP campaign development, fundraising, all the above. Yes, please. I need all of that. Thank you very much. Perhaps maybe also managing my Zoom links. All right, Steph. That's a story for later. But it's stuff that she loves to do. So Stephanie is a firm advocate for implementation of AI in business, which I find immensely helpful, but is also concerned about its usage for neurodivergence because it's kind of started to replace believing in your own intuition and developing that for our internal validation instead of using AI. So you have a lot of great stories that what I love is to use stories because I feel like storytelling helps people to understand things that they can relate to rather than just hearing sort of some definitions. So welcome, Stephanie. Thank you for taking your coffee and joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
What does your mug say?
This says, "Let the adventure begin." I actually bought it when I was in Arizona in August. I just saw it and I was on an adventure at the time and I thought, this is important. So I got myself one of these.
Sometimes when you're neurodivergent, every day is an adventure. So I ask all my guests this. So everybody sort of has a story. I know I have my own. Can you share a moment in your life where the universe sort of handed you an unexpected opportunity to grow? One of those moments that at the time didn't really feel like a gift. It may have kind of sucked at the time, but now has sort of become something that you realize you've learned something from it and you've learned to grow from it and you've made it a part of your path and your purpose.
Yeah, so I think the entire year of me being 23 was the year that the universe showered upon me all of the lessons that would take me forward from that point. That was the year that we realized that my son was neurodivergent, but he was only 2 at the time. So trying to get anyone to take that seriously was really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'd had something called symphysis pubis dysfunction when I was pregnant, which meant that I had a lot of pelvic pain. And that's meant to go away within a year of having a baby, and mine didn't. And I was really struggling. I was parenting a completely feral toddler who is now a 13-year-old, 5'4", strapping young man. But at the time, he was a lot of work, and I was in pain. And the sort of chain of events that came about that year meant that I was kind of thrust into this world of I am disabled, and I'm also parenting someone who's disabled in a different way. And in the years that would follow, I would have to learn a lot of things that were completely outside of my own frame of reference, because things like autism and ADHD that my son would be diagnosed with later were not things I had any experience of. I had like one cousin who was very autistic, who I met when I was about 19, and they lived far away, so we didn't really know them. So parenting a child with that needs profile was completely outside of anything I thought I would ever do. And then my own disability, trying to get the right help in terms of, financial support from the government. And I think what I learned from those things is three things really: is that knowing how to acknowledge the impairment and actually see it for what it is and give it a name. And also, the reframe, how do we get around that? How we get past that? But then also this huge advocacy piece, because if we don't speak up for our needs and the needs of those who can't speak up for themselves, nobody's going to know how to help us thrive. And that is something that I've very much taken forward into my business, into my life, into my relationships. But being 23, that was one of the hardest years of my life to date, I'll be honest. That's the year that ultimately was the year I got my wheelchair. Lots of things happened that would set me on a very challenging trajectory, which has been infinitely rewarding, even if it felt like hell at the time.
Thank you for sharing that story, because that's actually a lot of the work that I do in my program as well, that people who go through a situation like that and then allow themselves to be seen as a victim of something, and focus more on why did this happen to me? This is so unfair. Am I being tested, rather than what's the opportunity for growth here?
Yeah,
Those people
exactly.
really end up feeling stuck and victimized and really very unhappy.
Yeah.
I also want to add, as a therapist myself, you are correct, because my daughter's also was diagnosed with ADHD, but not until her teens. It is a very difficult road when you have some, like, inherently that there's something wrong with your child, but you're absolutely correct. When they're 2 years old, nobody wants to diagnose them, because they're like, this is just 2-year-old stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not 2-year-old stuff. You watch other children, you watch your own.
Well, this is it. I think, there's a lot of things that present things like autism and ADHD, which could be normal toddler behavior. But when they bypass the normal milestones, that's when you realize it's more. And for a long time, it was dismissed as, I was a young mother. I was 21 when I had my son. I don't regret that for a second, because what happened with my hips meant it was better to have him young. But, it's a lot of things kind of didn't fit the normal developmental milestones. And I was saying to them, this is not normal. And I was still saying the same thing 3 years later. And it's really hard when you're saying this is happening and they're trying to push back. And as a result, it took a further 4 years from the first signs to even get him in front of a pediatrician who said, actually, I agree with you, Mrs. Ward. That was really hard.
Oh, I just got chill, because you're right. It's not only that your child is too young, but it's also you're too young and you don't know what you're talking about, and we're the doctors and we know.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. Like when the doctor said that the reason my son had developmental issues was because my dad and my mum were divorced. I'm like, I really don't think that's what this is, but sure. It broke my heart, because I could tell that I was doing everything right. I followed the books. I did what I was told to do. Read to your child, play with your child. And it didn't make a difference. He didn't talk till he was 7. Despite private speech therapy, private interventions, we had to pay for it ourselves, because the NHS in the UK wouldn't give enough of what he needed. And if that wasn't working, like, surely this is more than just me being young and stupid, right?
But then there's also advocating for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, this is all normal. Just, go home and cry it off or whatever, but, shake it off.
Mm-hmm.
Oof. And obviously this has become the basis of the work that you do, because you felt that people were not being represented.
Well, yeah, that's it. And, to get my son the sort of like financial help and things like that, there's a lot of forms to fill in, right? And you have to frame the worst days to get this kind of help. And I'm really grateful. In the beginning, I found a couple called Michelle and Richard, who were very, very wonderful friends. Richard had a barista style coffee machine in his kitchen. You're like talking like a 2,000 quid like coffee machine. And we all would pile into Richard's kitchen and we'd all have a coffee and cry about the fact we hadn't slept. But what was really cool is they taught me how to fill those forms in. And just that little bit of someone climbing into the hole with you when things are bad and saying, I'm going to sit here with you. I'm going to love on you until you can do that for yourself. Michelle actually passed away last year from a brain tumor. And I am very proud to say that part of her legacy was she helped me to develop skills that I now use to help people en masse with no charge. I will do people's access to work applications for free because the form filling is a hard thing for them, but I've got the skills to do that. And if that opens a door, I'm happy to give that away.
And that's actually one of the, when we had first met, that was one of the things that was, that, I was really drawn to with you, is that you're trying to find this balance between, I do want to help people and I want to be able to have free resources, which you do. And we will talk about those as well. But I also have to pay my bills and I have to bless myself as well. Mm-hmm. When we start off, let's kind of just do a little bit of a definition here. Can you tell the audience specifically when neurodivergence and what that pertains to?
Yeah, so when we talk about neurodiversity, first of all, neurodiversity is how we understand neurology and the brain and how everyone's different profile shows up. Neurodivergent is the term to use to describe people that diverge from the norm. So this is conditions like autism spectrum conditions, ADHD, things like dyslexia, dyspraxia, or as in the UK, it's called developmental coordination disorder now because they like to rename things now and again. All of these different conditions that affect the way we learn and process information on neurodivergence.
Good answer, because I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are like, that's me. And do you feel like I know that your services specifically focus on people who are neurodivergent, and we can talk about, we've heard the heart behind that, but we can also talk about the mechanics behind it and how that helps. But you don't just help people that are neurodivergent business owners.
No, I don't. We will help everybody. So what we find is a lot of entrepreneurs are neurodivergent. And the reason they go for entrepreneurship is because it gives them the freedom of not having to answer to someone else, not having to take criticisms from another person. So a lot of us are drawn to self-employment. Neurodivergents are naturally more creative. So we go for creative careers, which are typically freelancing things as well. But we have a lot of clients who also support other neurodivergents. So we've got a schools trust in Cambridgeshire in the UK that have special needs schools. So they aren't typically neurodivergent, but we do help them because it's what we do. But what we do really well is we actually supply neurodivergent staff. What we know about what we do is that everyone benefits from the strategies in place for neurodivergence, but the neurodivergent people get more from it. So what we do can help every single person, regardless of their like neurotypes, because it works for everyone. The way we do things helps neurodivergence more.
Okay. And that makes sense. And I totally relate with, again, discovering my own neurodivergence. I totally relate to the fact that we do need to own our own businesses, because sometimes the way that we do things does not fit into a box.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you work for somebody else, you're asked to fit into this, little box, sit here for, if you're going to get up to go to the bathroom, you have to check off and sign off. And we don't always fit into those boxes.
No, I didn't fit into a box. I honestly think that I would be completely unemployable. My original career, I was a pharmacy technician, and like everyone wanted to dispense prescriptions. I wanted to do audit management and date checking because I loved the satisfaction of making sure all the stock was claimed, it was all disposed of correctly. I loved the routine paperwork. I used to do the error management. So if people had like near misses or mistakes, I would look at patterns. So say, for example, if people were repeatedly giving the wrong strength of atenolol, I would look at the shelves as to where the drugs were placed and look at what we could do to, put them in slightly different places so there was more distinction between them. And I used to get a lot of satisfaction out of the paperwork, but that's not what my boss wanted me to do in the job at all. They had very different intentions for what I was supposed to do.
Well, the other piece of that is what I have found is that you might be putting things on the shelf in a way that makes sense for you and how your brain works, but that's not necessarily how everybody's brain works.
Yeah. And this is it. And, there's been research done where communications between neurotypicals So neurotypical 1 and neurotypical 2 talk, and they understand each other. Two neurodivergents can have a conversation and understand, but when there's cross-pollination between neurotypical and neurodivergent, it's like trying to get a Mac to talk to a PC and wondering why you're getting the wrong output. They don't speak the same language.
No, you're totally right. I cross-pollination.
Cross-pollination. I know. I couldn't think of a better word for it. So we'll
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. So you were a pharmacy tech. Now, I know that you had also on maternity leave started doing some things, some side jobs. That was while you were a pharmacy tech?
Yes, so I went off on maternity really early because my child was a big baby. He was 9 pounds, nearly 2 weeks early. He was just large. And so with my hip pain, I started freelancing because I was bored. And my ex-husband said, "Oh, go on this website and see if you can pick some work up." And so I was doing a bit of like copywriting here and there. And I actually became the third most popular copywriting freelancer on People Per Hour that year. To the point where Zenios, the CEO, actually contacted me and was like, "You do know that you've done this thing?" I was like, "Oh, have I?" But yeah, I did it because I didn't have a lot of money. My ex-husband wasn't exactly forthcoming financially, and so I had to find a way to, top up my maternity pay in a way that meant I could work around my newborn, who did not sleep. He would cry for 4 hours a day, from 3 p.m. till 7 p.m. He had colic and was allergic to milk as well. Um, but I had to find a way. Oh, it was awful, honestly.
Oh.
Like I was trying to get them to acknowledge the milk allergy. There was one day where I picked him up in the breastfeeding clinic and he just vomited and it was down my front, down my back, in my shoes, on the nurse, on the health visitor. And they were like, "Does he do that often?" I was like, 2 or 3 times a day. And
I've been
like
trying to tell you.
it's like he had to decorate the room with it for them to see it. Um, but yeah, like I kind of left it behind around 2014 because of all the health things I had going on, all these things. And it wasn't until sort of 2020, after I had my hip surgeries, I was like, I'm going to need to get a job here. I can't sit around anymore. I'm not on painkillers. I haven't got an excuse. And my friend Nikki said, "You should be a virtual assistant." I said, "Nikki, I'd rather poop in my hands and clap. That sounds horrible." And she was like, "I know, honey, but do it anyway."
Come up with these things.
Yeah. So I did that, and yeah, it blew up really quickly because it turns out that I was neurodivergent too. So people who were attracted to my way of thinking were people who might have known they were neurodivergent or weren't. But my client base grew very quickly because I think there's almost like a pandemic of people who say they can do a thing and then don't deliver. My ADHD won't allow me to not deliver because I'm a people pleaser, so I have to deliver. And like it was literally the adrenaline would kick in and I would just make it happen. And when you're reliable, people see that and they want to keep coming. And that's how I've grown a business.
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, we've all had experiences where we have put out, X number of dollars or pounds, whatever
Yeah.
pounds, and not gotten and there's no recourse.
No.
I mean,
There's not.
you're going by other people's testimonials, but it could be their friends for all they know, or somebody, who knows. So where's this term spicy come in?
Yeah, so it came from something that was on TikTok. So people were saying that like neurodivergence were like neurospicy. So there was a term when it came around, sort of people who did OnlyFans, like spicy accountants, and the spicy has kind of been used to describe people who are a little bit different. So neurospicy was a term attributed to people who were neurodivergent. And so a few years ago, I was sitting talking to a friend of mine, Billy, and I was saying like, we have like that the whole spicy brain energy. Like we bring our spicy brains, sprinkle it all over your business. And he's like, "Okay, you need to trademark that." So I did. And that's how we named the company. It was Spicy Brain Energy.
Okay.
And I think as well, because neurodivergent people know that neurospicy is a term to describe them, I can be quite vague with my marketing because they don't need to know what I do to know that spicy brain is for them. So if anywhere I show up, my people see spicy brain, they're like, "That's me," and then they come and find out more. And that's how we market to people.
Okay. Hey, that works.
Yeah.
And then comes AI.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the neurodivergent, like, this is a way I can seem normal, right? Because I can speak. What did you call it? What was the other word?
Neurotypical.
Neurotypical. I can speak neurotypical with the help of AI.
Yeah. And I think the thing is AI came out of nowhere. Overnight, we were thrust with ChatGPT, and everyone was just like, "Oh my goodness, I can ask it questions and it can do my work for me." And you know what? That sounds like a dream, right? Like being able to say, write me a social media post about this, and it does. It sounds like the dream. But I think what people don't understand is there's lots and lots of different ways to use AI. And I think a lot of us, first of all, plunged into it without knowing very much about things like data security. Like, I think what a lot of people don't realize is everything you feed into AI, it's like ChatGPT, is an open source large language model. So whatever you're feeding in there, someone else can pull down. So if you're trying to feed in your best ideas about your business, someone else could use those later because ChatGPT remembers it and shares it. But the thing is as well, you've got two different ways to deploy AI. You've got your generative AI, which is your chatbots, your things that create. But there's also agentic AI, which is a very different way of using AI in terms of you're having AI agents that do things for you. But the problem is that most people are using generative AI and they're not using it in ways that are good for them. AI can be great as a starting point, right? Like you'll know yourself, when you've got a big task in front of you, getting the momentum going for a task is inherently really difficult. So if you've got a generative engine that can spit out something that'll get you started, you can do the rest yourself. And that is an excellent use of AI. People are adopting AI because they have to, but they don't realize that actually an over-reliance on it is starting to strip away our soft skills. And generative AI is the AI that I have the problem with, because that's the problem that my people are facing right now.
Because they're using it for all of their copy, but them is missing from that.
Well, this is it. People, you know, if you're going to use AI, you can feed yourself into it as much as you want, but it's never going to truly be you. I think autistic people tend to use generative AI to get facts. We know that young people now aren't using Google to search anymore. They're going and asking ChatGPT. So as if businesses didn't have enough to do with things like search engine optimization, we now need to optimize for generative engine optimization so that we show up in ChatGPT. But our young people are using that to get facts and information. So if an autistic person is using it for facts, they might not check those facts. They might trust it because autistic people don't necessarily understand that people can lie. Tech can lie. The other side of the coin is that ADHD people are using it to validate their ideas. So we're feeding our things in and getting ratification on it, asking it to say, is this good, is this bad? And the thing is that neurodivergent people have lacking in what's called interoception, which is the understanding of bodily feelings, right? So people with learning disabilities in particular are more likely to die from constipation because they don't understand the difference between needing a poop and feeling anxious. So if we can't understand, like, can you imagine that, right? Like this is a real thing that happens, you know? If we can't understand the difference between needing to empty our bowels and something like apprehension, how are we supposed to trust our intuition if we can't understand the basic physiological needs of our bodies? And that's something that really troubles me because we're starting to lose soft skills because of an over-reliance on AI.
Oof. Okay, poop has now come up twice in this podcast. So we are getting really spicy here with no, we love having you, Steph. So believe it or not, we are already halfway through. So we are going to go into a 2-minute break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about, are there ways that we can use AI in a way that it still keeps who we are and uses our intuition. So we'll see you in 2 minutes. Cut the shit. Stop struggling to feel present. Stop being taken advantage of. Express how you feel and stop making choices based on what other people think. Intuition Unleashed, a revolution in personal liberation podcast is your go-to resource for combining guidance with mental health and spirituality and solving your questions about why you can't seem to catch a break and find your true happiness. And you can find more episodes at becknelson.com/podcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Pat. I'm the host of the Dr. Pat Show, and I am the creator of the Transformation Network, doing what we do in the world of positive radio, informed, educated, positive media. Independent radio hosts and independent networks have been the face of positive messaging over the past decade. So all of us here have decided we're going to put together an independent network that is going to enable people to bring their positive message of hope, inspiration, and conscious action to the forefront. Help us create a future of amazing, uplifting stories that can be told so we can tell our children and they can tell their children of what hope and conscious action is all about.
I want to thank you all for tuning us in, turning us on transformationtalkradio.com.
Welcome back to the second half of our show, Intuition Unleashed. I'm Becc Nelson, and this is my guest, Stephanie Ward. And wow, we're talking about a business-minded AI, particularly for neurodivergence. And wow, did this time go by quickly? Because as we know, the ADHD people can talk. So let's go back to specifically talking about the double-edged sword of AI. You had told me, this is a great example, right? You had told me when we had talked before, Stephanie, about someone who used the AI who was autistic.
Yes. So there was two people who were having a bit of a dispute in my circles, and one of them had emailed the second person, and the second person had replied to the first person, and then the second person had chased the first person and hadn't heard back. And then the first person eventually emailed about 3 weeks later to the second person with quite an unpleasant email. And the second person, it turned out, was having some quite serious health tests done on that day. And so they didn't reply for several days. And person one didn't like how this had gone down, even though they hadn't seen the two chaser emails from person two. So they fed the interaction into ChatGPT. And ChatGPT told this autistic woman that person two was a narcissist. And person one posted this all over Facebook. Now, I happen to know of this interaction because I know both people involved. And I think it's just so dangerous that ChatGPT validated this person's stance of, yes, this person is a narcissist. This person has behaved very narcissistically. And actually, they were having tests for something quite serious that meant they couldn't reply that day. And if you've got an autistic person who's taking that as fact, taking that as law, what happens is that they don't actually question it. And I think during the pandemic, because we were all cut off from each other, we were all isolated, and we lost our soft skills. We weren't practicing not necessarily masking, but the skills that we would normally have to kind of fit in with things like logic and reasoning. So, if somebody doesn't reply to you on a text, you can sit and logically think, okay, maybe they're not very well, maybe they're busy. But because we're relying on external validation rather than looking at ourselves, we're losing those skills, and actually it's creating some really damaging narratives, especially for people like autistic people who don't necessarily get social stuff anyway. We're not able to rebuild these soft skills because we're getting it from somewhere else, which is inaccurate.
So are you saying that particularly during the pandemic that you feel like it was a bit damaging for neurodivergent people, maybe particularly autistic people, because they lost those interactions?
Absolutely. I really do. I think that, being in the world, we learn to mask, we learn to camouflage, and we learn to blend in with what's going on around us. During the pandemic, we spent a few years in our homes without really going out, without having to talk to people, without having to connect. And the problem is that, understanding emotions, understanding people, these are skills. For an autistic person who isn't born with natural empathy, it's a skill that we develop. It's something we learn to understand. We know that if somebody is crying, they feel sad. And as we go through our life, we understand what sad feels like, and we can begin to empathize. But if we aren't around people and absorbing their emotions and processing that is skills that we lose. And the problem, like I say, if we are going to AI to fill those gaps, we're never going to rebuild those, and we're going to further isolate ourselves. And actually, I think we can increase our own impairments with this. We further disable ourselves when we lose our soft skills. And I don't like it when people say autistic people aren't empathetic, because my own son has been in a special school since he was 7. And the first thing they do is self-awareness and emotional literacy, because being able to communicate how they feel means they're less likely to have aggressive outbursts, because they're able to say, I feel angry right now. So they can absolutely learn it. But AI for adults especially is taking that away.
And why should they have to, right? If they have AI to interpret for them, the problem is that the interpretation doesn't take all the factors into consideration.
Well, it doesn't. Like, what really frustrates me is that generative AI, it's not a person. You're not getting a human touch out of that. And like what I think we do really well with our sort of work is that we give that human touch, you know? So if somebody comes to us dysregulated because of an email that they don't understand the tone of, ChatGPT would give one answer, but actually we can sit and say to them, so do you think the person meant it like that? Or do you think maybe they're having a bad day? Do you think they could be stressed and they're taking it out on you in error? Or do you think they've misunderstood? ChatGPT won't give you questions, it gives you answers. And sometimes we need to be questioned so we can look inwards, reflect on things intuitively, and be like, okay, actually, this is what I think it is. But generative AI doesn't do that.
No, you're right. And you had said before the break, people look for validation through AI for ChatGPT. And you're absolutely right, because I've never plugged into anything into there and had them say, you know what, that idea sucks. Like, rethink the whole thing.
Yeah, this is it. Like,
so
it won't do that. It won't tell you that things are rubbish because it's meant to be an impartial sort of, it'll try and balance it out. It'll kind of, I'm not going to say proof again, but it's kind of like the sandwich, right? It gives you the bread, it gives you the fun, it gives you the bread again. Yeah. So it gives you something good. It gives you the sort of critiques, but then it ends on a good. And it's really easy for us to miss the critique if we're getting the positives either side of it. You can tell it, you know, you can say to it, give this your, like, treat this like a Gordon Ramsay and I'm your chef. Tell me exactly what you think of this. And it will be harsher, but you have to know to tell it that. And actually, I would love for something to be developed where we feed something in and it asks us, where does that feel in your body? Does that feel like a good feeling? Which part of your body is that? Could it be one of these feelings? If it's a bad one, how do we get around that? Asking us the questions so we tap back into that intuition that's already inside.
Okay, you have been known to say AI can support you or silence you, and it depends on who's driving.
Absolutely. It's absolutely. You have the control. You are in the driving seat when it comes to running your business. And I genuinely believe that we can use AI constructively. There's so many tools right now, like Fathom is a great one where it transcribes your meetings, it gives you a summary. These things are brilliant, but you have to be responsible for taking that transcription and doing the things with it at the end. You know,
Okay.
We don't want to be silencing ourselves by trusting something that doesn't have a brain to run our businesses. Now, agentic AI is slightly different. Agentic AI is like having an apprentice. You give them very strict rules and a very strict one task, and you say, you just do that one thing. And I think agentic AI has got a lot of potential for neurodivergence because it's going to take away the monotonous admin. I had a great chat today with Jeannie McGilvery from Autumn.ai, and what they are doing with agentic AI is absolutely one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. I just sat like this the whole time because I can see how that can be deployed in neurodivergent businesses without impairing the founder, without taking the creativity away. You know, like the last thing we want is to be taking away those decisions. We need to be responsible for the decisions. We need to be able to delegate the tasks, not the decisions.
So there's two pieces to this, right? Because it's not all bad. It can be very empowering, but then they can also people outsourcing their own intuition to these algorithms. So can you speak about both sides of that?
Yeah. So the thing is that if you're when people are outsourcing their intuition to algorithms, we're talking about the generative side of AI. So if you're looking at generative versus agentic is, you know, you said do this task and keep doing it and it'll do it. When you're outsourcing it to the generative stuff, things like ChatGPT are reactive. They react to what you put in. And the thing is as well, neurodivergents don't necessarily know what their blind spots are. So if you're giving ChatGPT information or any language model information, it only works on what you've given it plus its existing knowledge base. It can't get all of the contents, all of the juice out of here. So what I love about having a human element to support is that a human can say, have you thought of it like this? ChatGPT won't ask you that unless you ask it to ask you that. So overall, what I think is lacking here is training. People need to understand the tool they're working with, know the limitations. That's how we by understanding the limitations, that is how we take back our control. That's how we understand how we can use it for specific things without giving it the control, without using it as intuition, without using it as our validation.
Okay, so talk a little bit more about what you would use as what's the intuition? How does that play into using the AI? And you talked a lot about feeling it in your body. So discuss that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's I'm trying to think how to say this. It's like, my words aren't wording. So if we're feeding stuff to a language model, okay, we want a starting point here. We want a structure. That's where I'm going with this. We want it to give us a structure so that we can feed our beautiful creativity all over the structure. It gets the momentum going. It gets our juices flowing. We get to give it our brain juice. But then what we should be doing afterwards, rather than asking it to fill in the gaps, we ask it to ask us things. We ask it to ask, if we can't understand, if we look at our launch, if you're launching a product and you're reading your launch and something doesn't feel right, you shouldn't be asking ChatGPT why it doesn't feel right. What we need to do is actually say of it, ask me 20 questions about like how I feel about this, and get it to really grill you and get you to look into yourself. It's like going to a friend. If you went to a friend and asked them to give you feedback, if you go to your bestie, they're going to tell you how amazing it is. Where if you go to a business associate, they're going to pull it apart. What you want to do is get the AI to be the business associate, not the bestie.
To ask you the questions that's going to challenge you to rethink your product or whatever.
That's exactly it. We need it to question us, not us to question it. We need it to push us further. If we're going to use generative AI for things like creative pursuits, we need to get it to question us, because it's us we are the unique things here. In our businesses, we have all of this beautiful, beautiful intelligence, creativity, all of this fabulous stuff. We need to get it out of us. And I honestly think sometimes AI just is limited in that. We need a human. If we don't have a human involved, we lose part of this.
So people are putting way too much value on it. And honestly, so this goes into the authenticity piece, because if you know somebody, or you start to trust a certain brand or a certain person and how they talk, and that person starts using Chat GPT as an example, you lose your authenticity. It's not how you would normally talk. And people will say, well, I put into things, I put some of my writing in there, which does help to get that voice. But then it's this masking behavior that you talk about.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, in the UK, like we are quite different in the UK in that our market thinks quite psychologically differently to an American market, right? Our people don't trust. Our people are not very trusting at all. So a lot of people, if they see a brand's voice change because they're using AI, they immediately lose trust in that brand. If it doesn't sound like the human that they're used to, they won't trust that anymore. So it's, using the ChatGPT to help us to plan the structure, help us to organize the content, but still being us. Because if we use ChatGPT to do it for us, it is a form of masking. It's trying to match the normies. And in reality, there's no such thing as normal as the first thing. But, I've got more business from being an unmasked woman with ADHD than I ever got when I was masking, because I turn up as an absolute chaos goblin. I write all my own social media content, and guess what? It is feral. Like, if you go back to the end of August when I was in the USA, I flew to San Diego with 3 days notice, bombed up to Temecula to go and have a chat with my friend, and then I was in Oceanside the next day. I was in Queen Creek in Arizona the next day. But like, by showing up and being chaotic and being exactly who I am, people are attracted to that. And you cannot get that from a generative language model.
And there are certain phrases too. It's like they can almost make a list of phrases that are they make it so obvious that it's AI.
Yeah.
When things are like, this is not just another ... then guess what? It is just another.
If I get one more teenager apply for a job with me and put their cover letter saying, my rich tapestry of experience, I will staple their CV to their forehead, because you cannot have a rich tapestry of experience at 17 years old. No. And if one more person uses the word elevate or no fluff or cookie cutter, I'm just, I'm just going to get a staple gun at this point and just start stapling things to people, because it's so frustrating seeing the same language used over and over and over. You know, the M dash, now people won't use the M dash anymore because ChatGPT uses it so much that everyone assumes it's AI.
What the heck is M dash?
So you know how you've got like the short one, which is like a hyphen?
Okay.
The M dash is the longer version. So if you see those long dashes, yeah, long dashes in copy is a telltale sign of AI. Now, what a lot of copywriters will tell you is they've used it for years. They're scared to use that now because AI has overused it.
Okay. So what are some ways you need to learn how to use certain questions and things like that to have it challenge you, like you said, like your bestie would, or the person that not your bestie, because they're going to tell you what you want to hear, right?
Yeah,
Which ChatGPT will definitely do if you don't tell it to kick your butt.
yeah. But also what ChatGPT, what it'll do is it will start giving you information and say, do you want me to do this? And it takes you so far off task. And it's like, it's almost like it's giving us rabbit holes. It's terrible for ADHD because you'll ask it a question, it'll give you an output and say, do you want me to do this thing? It's like, well, no, I'm not finished. Don't do that. And it's distracting.
So how can awareness and community help to break this cycle?
So I think the awareness for this is that we need to be aware that AI is not there to replace us. Agentic AI is there to do tasks, but generative AI is not a replacement for you. It is a starting point. It is an extra layer of help. It is something that gives you structures that you can build around with your own beautiful brain source, because all of the things in here are what make you and your business stand out. And I think, when it comes to the community element here, is that building a community around you who see who you are and celebrate your authenticity will give you the confidence to not rely on AI to do the work for you. Because when you are sending your message out into the world and you've got people around you who are like, yes, this is what I need to hear, there's something that it triggers the dopamine. It makes us feel good about what we're saying and we want to do more of it. But if we can show up as our authentic selves, that is the key here. Use AI to give you a plan, use it to suggest the topics, use it to suggest a structure, but you need to do the creative parts yourself and trust in how you feel about that when you're putting that into the world. Because we aren't robots, so why are we letting robots be us?
Oh, that is so true. Because you know why? Because it's easy. I can whip it up and I'm done.
Yeah.
And that's so tempting.
And the thing is, I've used AI for stuff like this. I wrote a resume bio hybrid for a friend, and I took a website and I took a resume and I had the AI rinse it together and put a structure together. But I went through and I edited it all so it had her voice throughout it. I just needed the structure done so that I could build around it.
But it is so tempting for us as neurodivergents to use AI because with ADHD, for example, you have trouble staying on task. You have trouble getting things done. Things become so overwhelming that you actually freeze and don't do it at all. When I can just ask ChatGPT to do it and then, oh, great, I can go on to the next thing. That solves that issue. That is so tempting.
It is. And the thing is as well, a lot of neurodivergents, because of the nature of the beast of the condition, they've never really achieved the success they should have had because the conditions they have presented barriers for their entire lives. So a lot of them don't have the money to invest in a virtual assistant. So using AI is quite a nice way of getting that a little bit extra help, working smarter, not harder. But I think when we think about working smarter, not harder, if we are using the AI wrong, we're working harder, not smarter. So it's having an awareness of what we want to get from our AI. What do we want it to do for us? Do we want it to do us a 12-month social media plan? Do we then want it to give you post ideas for all of January? Do we want it then to give a brief draft of things you could write, but then, knowing what we want from it so that we can then build out the rest? Because the reality is, there is a part of us that needs to get some traction, to get some money in, to be able to invest in the actual human help. But if we are using AI for the right things, it means the human help can be much more targeted. Like, I can't wait to start deploying AI agents for my clients, because if a client has 10 hours a week with me and we're spending 6 of them on monotony, they're only getting 4 hours of the real juice.
Right.
I can tell you now, my team all manage inboxes for clients. but there's no way that's the best use of their time. What if we had agents doing that? So my team spent the week doing the more creative tasks and getting the client real bang for their buck, because our rates are the same whether we're managing an inbox or editing a video. It's all the same. So it's about using it to take care of the things that are the least useful in terms of our time and our investment, so that we can really focus on what's important.
And what's important, because I've also heard you say delegate tasks, not decisions.
Yeah, the thing is, you are in charge of your business, right? Your business is yours. And this is something that annoys me with a lot of virtual assistants, is that they try to make themselves indispensable by taking ownership of parts of their clients' businesses. And that's uncomfortable for me, because it's their business. It's not my business. You know, my clients' businesses are not my business. And by me holding the reins for them, that means that they don't have full autonomy. So they should be making all the decisions. They should be very strategic, very top level. Somebody else should be doing the day-to-day tasks. When you delegate your decisions, you lose your power, and we need to take that back.
That's what this show is all about, baby.
Yes.
So, okay, when do you suggest there's a time to pause and listen to your body's signals instead of looking at the analytics? How do you teach your clients to do that?
Yeah, so what we do when we first start working with someone, we'll take the weight, because we know how heavy it feels when you feel overwhelmed. So we'll take the weight, but we will start giving it back very mindfully. So we will let them take a minute, because when things go quiet, when the overwhelm is not as prevalent, you can start to listen to your body, because there's not all the noise in your brain. So you can hear the noise in the rest of you. And I think learning to pause is really hard, especially in ADHD. And I think one of the most powerful things I ever did learn was the power of the pause, the power to take a breath and stop, reacting from a place of power, not a place of fear. But you can't do that when you're overwhelmed.
Do you have an example of that, or when somebody's learned to do that, or even you?
I mean, I can give you one for me, yes. So in years gone by, I have been very reactive. You know, I'm the kind of person that would see an email come through, panic and reply. And, you know, a girl I know on LinkedIn actually had an email come from a client which looked like a complaint. She overcompensated, and the result was she lost the client because the client felt the panic. But now what I tend to do is, if I see something that makes me feel that fight or flight, I will not look at it. I will shut that down and I will not look at it. And I will give it 30 minutes before I'll even go back to it. And what you tend to find is when someone is panicking, one of two things will happen. Either within 30 minutes, they'll find the solution and they'll have calmed down, or they'll have calmed enough anyway, and I'll be in a calmer place where I can go back to them and be constructive and calm. So I've had situations, you know, I have a team of neurodivergents. So things do happen and things can go wrong. And there's been times when I've wanted to react. We had a situation a little while ago with someone where I felt like I needed to take action. And actually, so my best friend Ben is actually a psychic medium who does intuitive business consultancy. And I was actually in LA with Ben at the time. And he said, right, you're going back into old patterns, sit down. And he said to me, and he gave me a read, but he said, you know that pausing here is the right thing to do. You need to pause. And so I promised him I wouldn't react to it. When I got back from LA, the next day the situation had righted itself, because sometimes if you pause, instead of reacting and panicking, things put themselves right. And if they don't, at least you're calm enough to put it right in a controlled way rather than a place of panic.
I see. So what you're saying is not listening to your intuition as in, should I do this or not? Like, does this excite me or not? But more in if I'm realizing that where I'm responding from is this place of panic, where does that come up for you?
Yeah, well, this is it. For me, like when I feel panic, it's almost like I know intuitively what I need to do, but there's something overriding it. But it does work for the positive things too, you know? Like sometimes my friend calls it chasing the woman in the red dress, and I can't remember who she got it from. It might have been a Hormozy quote. But with ADHD, we see a new business idea and we chase the woman in the red dress. And actually, we don't need to do that, because we have a perfectly good business right in front of us. For like my example is, you know, there's all kinds of things I want to do. There's programs I want to run, but they aren't the best use of my skills or time. The best use of my skills and time is getting up to trend with agentic AI to help my clients with that. It is running the virtual assistant business we already run and doing a sterling job of that. And it's providing high quality one-to-one support. Running courses, running one-to-many stuff does not serve my people well. So when I have a new idea, I pause on that too. And I'll be like, does this feel aligned? Does it feel right? I cancelled the whole launch a month ago because I had this great plan and there was a visceral discomfort of this doesn't feel aligned anymore. And so we pulled the whole thing. And guess what? 4 new VA clients came in within a week. That was the universe telling me that this was the right decision.
Do you say this too in the UK with the ADHD? Squirrel.
Oh God, yeah. One of my friends' businesses is called the Lost Squirrel Creative because squirrels.
Right. So we're chasing squirrels, but we're forgetting like what's in front of us right here because the shiny object over here.
Yeah.
All right. So sometimes we need to pause. I said, I love that you have this balance between, bringing in business, but also serving. You have a free community called the Spicy Brain Collective. That's a free resource.
Yes.
And that we have in the show notes, we have a link to that so that people can join that free community and then probably support each other.
Yeah, so the way we do things, we have a rousing pep talk every Monday at 9 o'clock UK time, which is 4 a.m. Eastern, and it is, I want to say 1 a.m. Pacific, I'm guessing, because that's, 8 hours behind. But if we are starting to get more of a US and Australian market, so we're looking at putting an additional time on an evening in our time so that we can meet the needs of our clients in the US, because we love our Americans. We absolutely love our people over there. But what we do is essentially bring people together, and it's like when you work for yourself, you are alone. So what we're trying to do is give them a place where they can have the water cooler chat, connect with one another, and make new friends, because guess what? The power is in the community. It's in the connection. It's in supporting one another and celebrating each other's successes.
Not AI.
Not AI. AI has its uses, but community is better.
So the key takeaway here, believe it or not, we're time to wrap up. The key takeaway here is AI does have its place, but you want to balance it with people's intuitive trust and maybe some social connections through your free community as well.
Absolutely.
So please follow Stephanie's free community. Look up her business opportunities there for assistance. Thank you so much for staying up late with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great fun.
Yes, and of course it went by in a flash, as it always does. So thanks everybody for joining me and Stephanie Ward. And remember, when you use your intuition, you regain your power. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Intuition Unleashed. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. But before you go, we have one little challenge for you. Most of us have sneaky little habits that hold us back and trip us up, so why not take this not at all uncomfortable quiz to find out what you do to derail yourself from achieving your goals and how you can call yourself out on your own BS. So get to know your self-sabotage specialty and take the first step towards getting out of the way of your own success. Just visit https:/becknelson.com/quiz and take the quiz now. That's becknelson.com/quiz, and we can't wait to see your results. As always, we'll be back next week with more Intuition Unleashed. We appreciate you. Thanks for listening.